Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around we're doing the 2025 Superman movie. Directed by James Gunn, starring David Corenswet, Rachel Brosnahan and Nicholas Hoult. I've seen the movie, I've got thoughts about it, but there's something else that not many people are mentioning about this particular iteration of Superman. And I have thought of it, and it makes it a little more interesting. Holding it up to the light and shining a different reflection on it. In 9 years' time, in 2034, Superman falls into the public domain. People are going to be able to take the original Superman, including characters like Lois Lane, and do with them what they will. They won't need Warner Brothers' permission. They won't need to be authorized. It will be carte blanche for people to make Superman movies, stories, books, comics, YouTube videos, anything they like in 2034, which isn't that far away. So watching this Superman movie, which I saw 2 days ago, David Corenswet may well be the last good Superman we get once the intellectual property falls into the public domain. There's not going to be really an impetus for a movie company, whatever that looks like in 9 years' time, to make Superman movies at the level that this movie is being made. And that's kind of interesting. What's Superman going to look like after 2034? Who knows? But he's going to have company, because in 2035, Batman falls into the public domain. And in 2037, Wonder Woman falls into the public domain. So in 9, 10, and 12 years from now, a lot of the heavy hitters of DC's intellectual property are going to be anybody's. Marvel's got a little bit easier. They've got a little longer. Captain America and the Submariner and characters like that didn't appear until 1939, 1940. So they've got a few years yet. But DC is running towards a deadline. And that deadline is to get as much money and as much creative wonderfulness as they can in the next 9 years. So there's a real possibility that David Corenswet is going to be the last Superman of any real merit in the history of cinema. Could be wrong, but it's something that's a definite possibility. So getting back to the movie now that I've blown my little mind, James Gunn, who co-runs the whole DC shebang, has been making superhero movies for a quarter of a century now. He knows what he's doing. And the first thing he ditches in this new Superman is the origin story. There's a crawl at the start of the movie that tells us what happened, that metahumans have appeared a number of decades ago, that 30 years ago, a spaceship crashed into a Kansas farmhouse, and the baby in it was raised by Jonathan and Martha Kent. And 3 years ago, Superman burst onto the scene just as Clark Kent started working for the Daily Planet. So all of that's dealt with in a minute. We don't need to have that rehashed for us. We've seen it so many times with so many different people that there's no point in rehashing that, except in the form of basically bullet points. And I'm good with that. We'll start the movie, and I'm not doing many spoilers. There are some really cool bits in this, which I'm going nowhere near. We start the movie, as one of the trailers have shown us, with Superman getting his ass kicked. He crashes into Antarctica, not far away from his fortress of solitude, and is rescued by his very random dog, who is a foster dog to him, for reasons I won't tell you. And he's dragged to the Fortress of Solitude, where the Superman robots, which have been part of the Superman mythology since the 1950s, put him on a gurney and put him in the rays of our yellow sun under an enormous magnifying glass so that he can recharge himself. He's had his ass kicked by something called the Hammer of Baravia. Baravia being one of the two countries that is fighting a war somewhere in Asia, or maybe Europe. It doesn't actually specify. Where Baravia was going to invade a country called Jaunapur, but Superman stopped it. He stopped the tanks and the military equipment at the border, and this has caused a lot of ructions with the US government. who thinks only it has the right to stop wars. So Superman has become a controversial figure. Yes, the people love him. Yes, he has stopped this war, which is a very obvious parallel between Russia invading Ukraine. And anybody who thinks differently is deluding themselves. And the other thing is, the relationship between Lois Lane and Clark Kent / Kal-El is established. They're dating, they're almost cohabitating. Clark has interviewed Superman a number of times, but Lois decides she wants to interview Superman. And we get a scene in this movie where the questions are asked that need to be asked. If you have a very powerful being, what are your obligations in stopping a war? What should you do and what should you not do? Where are the moral boundaries? Where are the checks and balances on the actions you decide arbitrarily to take? And Lois challenges Superman with those questions. And he doesn't find that comfortable at all, because he knows that what he did was save lives. And that's his main impetus. He's got these powers. He's a good man. He wants to save lives. To arbitrarily interfere with the lives of many people, there's a grey area there which doesn't fit into the way global geopolitics works either in our universe or in the DC universe. So there's some really interesting questions raised right at the start. And yes, people may see that as a slowing down of the movie and they just want to get to the punchy bits. But I think that these questions are really interesting. We also have Lex Luthor, who is wonderfully portrayed by Nicholas Hoult. And Luthor is an envious, evil character. There is no ambiguity about him. There's no going to be retconning 3 movies from now where he's a good guy. This guy shoots a person in the head in front of Superman when Superman is held in a prison in a pocket universe and just waves it off. He is a genuinely damaged human being, not unlike certain billionaires in our own world who would do the same thing were they able to get away with it. And Luthor's been working on ways to defeat Superman for years. He's envious of Superman, and he admits it. He goes into a total envy rant at the end of the movie and has worked out ways to work around Superman. And he knows that Superman is not totally invulnerable. He's incredibly strong, incredibly resilient, and he can regenerate quite well. But he's not invulnerable, and Luthor knows this, and he plays on that, and he uses this. There's just so much to love in this movie. The Kryptonian origins of Superman are retconned in a way that's really interesting. And yes, it will piss off some of the fanboys, but I think it's perfect. I think it works well, and it plays into Superman's relationship with Jonathan and Martha Kent. And Pruitt Taylor Vince playing Jonathan Kent is magically good as the father who raised Superman. And he and his wife have a really nice relationship because Martha knows that Jonathan's the softie. He's not Kevin Costner this time around, being noble and doing a dumb sacrifice. He is the emotionally gentle member of that partnership. And he is a good man, but he is a man who is really in touch with his feelings. And I love that flipping the narrative and having Jonathan being the softie and the one who's prone to cry and the emotional one in his marriage. I totally love that. And Pruitt Taylor Vince, a character actor who is incredibly good in everything he does, in a couple of short scenes, maybe 2 or 3 scenes, gives us a character that you can easily love. He is incredible in this film. And he is part of that emotional verisimilitude that makes us believe that Clark Kent was raised to be a good man. And I love that. I think it's great writing. I think it's superb acting. I think those moments are the cherry on the cake for this movie. Now, Rachel Brosnahan and David Corenswet, their chemistry is terrific. The relationship, even when there is friction, and even when there is disagreement, and even when there is doubt about the relationship, they play off each other fantastically. The characters are hot for each other. The characters love each other. The characters respect each other. But there are points of ideological difference which matter and which are resolved eventually. But they are important. No relationship starts without friction. And to just have a lovey-dovey relationship without that friction, without disagreement, without those points of adjustment that we all make when we start a relationship, would make it a much less movie. And you could argue that that's one of the weak points in the Christopher Reeve Superman movie. Superman and Lois Lane don't have those points of adjustment in their relationship. It's pure romance without any reality to it. But this one has just that little bit of reality that makes it work really well. And one of the things I missed in the Zack Snyder Superman movies is right near the start, you see Superman's love of flying. He is joyous when he flies. He loves being able to do it. He loves the power. He loves the exhilaration of it. He loves flight. And we didn't get that with Henry Cavill's Superman, which is no shade on Henry Cavill. I think he did good with what he had. And he is an actor who has a lot of charisma and is worthy of our respect, even though he was handed the shitty end of the stick in the Zack Snyder Superman movies. Superman enjoying what he can do really landed for me. I liked that a lot. I think it took us back to the stuff we love about Superman. And then there's Krypto, the random dog he's got, and the randomness and the dog-like behavior of Krypto is actually used to help with the resolution of the movie. And we get a lot of Krypto in this movie. He's an agent of chaos, like a lot of pets are. Our cat Luna is an agent of chaos. And even though you can get them to do things, sometimes our pets keep us humble and stop us from being too up ourselves. We're the superior species. But when the pet needs something or wants something or doesn't back down, we find that that's not actually true. And the ensemble is really good. The Justice Gang and Mr. Taree, played by Edie Gathegi, is fantastic. Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern, is suitably an arsehole, even though he eventually does the right thing. He does it in such a wonderfully arseholey way. I'm there for that. And we also have Isabel Merced's Hawk Girl, who is a tough warrior. She does something during this movie which Superman would never do. And she acknowledges she is not Superman, and she does it. And I like that. I like Hawk Girl being, in some ways, the badass of the trio of the Justice Gang, as they're calling themselves at this stage of things. They'll begin through the course. They will either become the Justice League or the Justice Society. But at the moment, because Guy Gardner thought up the name, they're calling themselves the Justice Gang. We also get the engineer from The Authority. If you've read the Authority comic books, the engineer, Angela Speaker, is working for Lex Luthor. And she's had all of her blood replaced with nanotechnology. And so she can make weapons out of anything, including herself. And she is, in some ways, enough to take down Superman, at least temporarily. And that's kind of spectacular as well. I hope the Authority comes into this new DC universe, because those graphic novels are something special and something different and something way away from what Marvel has done. And I think that's one of the nice things about the beginning of this iteration of DC. They're not doing things the Marvel way. They're doing things their way. We've got Anthony Carrigan playing Rex Mason, Metamorpho. Metamorpho's been in comics since the early 1960s at least. And I remember reading about Metamorpho in comics in the early 1960s, where I used to piss away my lunch money. I'd get 20 cents for lunch money. And instead of buying lunch, I'd buy a comic book and hide it in my little briefcase that I took to school, my Samsonite port. Metamorpho was in those comics. And we also get a bit of Metamorpho backstory. We see the Stagg Industries building, which is his father-in-law's company, Simon Stagg's. And we do see Metamorpho at the end of the movie with his wife, who has to be Sapphire Stagg, who was in the comics right from the very start. And Metamorpho can transform himself into any element or chemical compound. And he is imprisoned by Lex Luthor and used by Lex Luthor to control Superman. But eventually he comes around, and right at the end of the movie, he joins the Justice Gang. Fantastic character, fantastic deep cut in the DC catalogue of characters. And Metamorpho is fun, and Anthony Carrigan gives the character a lot of grounding and a lot of depth. Even though he doesn't get a lot of scenes, we like the character that he is. And I want to see more of these random outlier DC characters in future movies. I think there's a lot of room for bringing in some characters that are very, very different from the kind of characters you get in a Marvel movie. I want to see Deadman in a movie, for instance. And we also get Lex Luthor's girlfriend, Eve Teschmacher, played by Sarah Sampaio. And she is great too. Rather than being the dumb blonde girlfriend, she actually gets a character arc, which shows that even though she's played as a pretty influencer, taking selfies and making herself attractive for Lex and for herself and for her followers online, her character gets a little more depth in this, and I'm there for that. I really like it. We get other characters in the year. Jimmy Olsen, we get Wendell Pierce playing Perry White, even though he's not given a lot to do. We get everything we could possibly need in a superhero movie in this film. And the movie is setting up a very different universe to either the Zack Snyder one or the 1980s Superman, or even the one with Brandon Routh, or anything we've seen in Superman TV series. This is something a bit different. This is something that I think is going to work. It's already getting good buzz. I do get a lot of stuff where people who are maybe not as self-aware as they should be are complaining because Superman has gone woke. And then I've seen online as well a 1940s Superman comic book cover where he's got Hitler in one hand and Mussolini in the other. So if you think Superman has gone woke and has gone stupid, you don't know the history of Superman. Superman is an immigrant, and in this movie, taking on a billionaire. And there are a lot of resonances in this film that talk about contemporary issues. For instance, the boss of Baravia, for me, parallels a lot of things that the President of the United States is manifesting. Bad hair, pretending to be an idiot more than he is, being incredibly greedy and into the money of his position. That character, Vasil Gurkos, is a Trump parallel, and you can't convince me otherwise. And even though the American government is in this movie and they imprison Superman in an outsourced pocket universe gulag owned by Lex Luthor, they don't address the US president directly, but the unwarranted and unjust imprisonment of people by outsourced prisons and outsourced paramilitary groups is something that does have a lot of parallels with current US policy. And I think it was a gutsy move to, even if it is slightly removed from directly referencing those things, the parallels are definitely there. That's a very smart move because when things shift, hopefully back to a more sane polity in America, this movie is going to stand up well because of that. Just in the same way the movies that fought back against McCarthyism in the 1950s play a lot better than the movies that lent into McCarthyism in the 1950s. I think having at least an acknowledgement of contemporary politics in a popular movie like this, which talks about militarism and talks about migrants and talks about the hubris of billionaires, you can't avoid politics if you're going to make that movie. And this movie, fortunately, doesn't do that. It doesn't shirk its responsibilities as a piece of fiction that's not just wish fulfillment fantasy for a certain group of people. So just to summarize on this movie, it's good. I think the relationship between Clark and Lois is so much better than it was between Christopher Reeve and Margaret Kidder. I think that for all of his virtues, Gene Hackman is a lesser Lex Luthor than Nicholas Hoult is. And I know that's controversial because the Christopher Reeve Superman movies are little ting gods for some people. But this one for me landed better in 2025 than the Christopher Reeve Superman movies landed for me in the 1980s. I'm optimistic about the future of DC's live action movies and other productions. I think they've got a very smart man at the helm. I think they've got a man who is not scared to be transgressive and is not playing it safe. And I think they've got the right people in front of the cameras to tell the stories that we're anticipating. And hopefully we will see over the next 9 years until Superman falls off the cliff and into the public domain. Something I forgot to tell you about going to see this movie in the cinema. Some woman took her baby and her toddler to see the movie, and they sat about 2 rows from the front. It wasn't a crowded session. And just before the movie started, they showed the Naked Gun trailer. So a toddler and a baby saw this moment from the Naked Gun trailer before they saw Superman.
I want you to keep an eye on him.
This oven is disgusting.
The baby cried through most of the movie, and the toddler talked through the rest of it. Maybe don't take your baby and your toddler to see Superman. Just an idea. So that's what I got for you this time around. Love the movie. Don't think it's perfect, but I think it's about 90% perfect. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can support the channel too by becoming a channel member or by becoming a patron for only a couple of bucks a month at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Next video, I've got a lot of really good 1970s movies to talk about that Imprint have sent me in their latest catalogue. A couple of really top-hitting Scorsese films and a bunch of others, some of which are obscurities, but they're pretty interesting obscurities. So until all of that stuff happens, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. If you're on the border of not seeing this Superman movie, I'd suggest see it and enjoy it. And I'll catch you next time.